Okay, this is a video which explains the question, popular piety can never replace the liturgy. Um, Hopefully you've had a chance to revise what popular piety is, so you've looked at things like the Stations of the Cross. But this answer that I'm going to do is going to really focus on the Rosary and a little bit on Eucharistic adoration. Um, Remember that overall a Catholic would say that nothing can replace the liturgy. So really, if you can, what you're going to try and do is demonstrate your knowledge of popular piety in the different forms, and then sort of blast in with the end and say actually nothing can replace the liturgy at all. It is the most important thing, the most important expression, the key expression of what it means to be Catholic. So a couple of points on popular piety. You're going to start off by saying many Catholics believe that popular piety can, for some people, replace the liturgy, and in particular, it's going to replace it possibly for people who can't get to church, either because of geography-wise, or perhaps there's an issue that means perhaps they're not really in touch with the faith like they used to be. And popular piety can be done anywhere. You don't need any special equipment, you don't need any priests, you don't need to be in a special building. So that has got a kind of accessibility to it and an appeal to some people who prefer that personal solo kind of prayer. So one of the things that Pope Francis has said that can back up this idea is that he says that popular piety is prayers deeply rooted in people's hearts. So he's saying something there about it being very authentic. So for some people, it is going to replace the liturgy because the implication there is it's something that's deep within someone. It's very authentic. It's very personal to them. So that's possibly a quote that you might be able to sort of bend into shape to use for that point. It would mean it might replace the liturgy because it's a little bit more accessible. So they might not be able to go to Mass every day, but they might be able to pray the Rosary every day, for instance, because they've got a set of Rosary beads in their house, or they've got 10 fingers. So in theory, they can actually pray the Rosary just using that. Hopefully that makes sense why that would be a point. It also gives us an opportunity to remember events of Jesus' life. So if you remember in class, we talked about how you have a little bit of meditation time in between each decade, in between each 10 Hail Marys of the Rosary. You meditate, you think about a particular story from Jesus' life. So it might be a sorrowful mystery where you're thinking about the sort of all of the events of the Passion of Jesus. It could be a joyful mystery, could be a mystery of light. So it just varies. So for some people, possibly in terms of their knowledge of the Bible, they're getting more of an overview of the Bible, possibly because they're looking at Jesus' life in more depth, possibly. And remember, when you're doing this question, you've got to say things like it may do this rather than it does do this, because it's a statement, so you can't actually prove it. So just be aware when you're writing up, you're saying it may do this for some people rather than it always does this, or for Catholics, they all believe. Your final point is going to be specifically on the Rosary again. So the first one is about popular piety generally. The second one was about learning about Jesus through the Rosary. And the last one is about the power of the Rosary. So it's something that's been used before praying. People have prayed it before they've gone into battles. People have carried it with them through wars. And they've asked Mary for intercession. So in terms of you showing your knowledge of religion and religious actions and things like that, religious beliefs, you're going to try and use the word intercession in there. Remember, that's where we ask Mary to pray for us. So lots of saints have talked about it, and it's been very important to many Catholics. And there's a nice little quote that you can use, that it's a powerful weapon. Now, you can do squeeze in a little bit of mini evaluation here, because Padre Pio is a more recent saint, is a more recent holy person in the Catholic faith, and he says that all prayer is a weapon. He doesn't compare it to the Rosary, but he just says that prayer is a powerful weapon. So we could argue that maybe popular piety, that some forms of popular piety, you pray when you're in Mass, you pray when you do the Rosary. So what makes one more powerful a weapon than the other is what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of a tricky bit of evaluation there. But the question is, in some ways, asking you is, a type of prayer can't replace another type of prayer. So if you can wangle that one in, if you're understanding where I'm trying to go with that, you could possibly use that for a bit of mini evaluation. Now, this is where you come to the end point, you come to your conclusion, and you're going to say very, very clearly that the Eucharist can never be replaced, that the liturgy can never be replaced. Remember, Mass is the only place where the Eucharist is born. And so nothing can ever replace that. And you're going to explore this quote, the source and summit of Christian life. Remember the source, the starting point, the origin, and the summit, the highest expression of what it means to be a Christian. So you're going to conclude that nothing can ever replace the Eucharist because it wouldn't have been described as the source and summit of the Christian life. You can further develop that, and this is why this conclusion is going to become quite a chunky point. Because Jesus actually commands the disciples to take part in the Eucharist in memory of him. He institutes the Eucharist at the Last Supper, remember. He kind of invents it, if you say in informal language. So we need to do what Jesus said. So nothing should replace that. Jesus didn't say, do the rosary in memory of me, or go and look at pictures of my life in memory of me, to I'm saying it in quite a cheeky way. But he did say, do the Eucharist in memory of him. So popular piety can't replace the liturgy. It shouldn't, because Jesus didn't command for it to happen, but he did command for the liturgy to happen. Now, here's a nice little bit of evaluation that you might want to use again, even though it's your conclusion, because we've not talked so far about Eucharistic adoration. And so if you remember, Eucharistic adoration is prayer in front of the Eucharist. So it's a type of prayer that uses the Eucharist, but it might also fit with people who don't want to go to Mass for whatever reason. Maybe there's a reason why they can't take Holy Communion, so they don't really feel part of it. For instance, we've talked about that quite recently when we talked about the family and divorce. So maybe, Eucharistic adoration combines that great beauty of the Eucharist with the authenticness, if you like, of popular piety, if that hopefully makes sense. So you're going to do a few ideas that say no, popular piety could be a good thing to replace the liturgy, and why. And remember, it's only for some people. But overall, you're arguing nothing can replace the liturgy, because it is so important. It is stated very clearly in the Catechism, and it is commanded by Jesus. So hopefully, it's a little bit of a complicated one, but hopefully that's useful for you, Alicia. Okay, thanks ever so much. Bye for now.